You're listening to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a place where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare of suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness, and my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting and Courting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 26. Today, we're going to talk about, music and how it can help our mood and how it can also help our well-being. So, Dr. Shahram Heshmatt wrote an article for Psychology Today, and it's titled Music, Emotion, and Well-Being. He discusses 10 elements of how music can serve us, but I am going to discuss just one, and I really want us to talk about what that can actually do in terms of serving our overall well-being. I'm also going to tell you about a couple of things in terms of how relatable it's been in my life. You can see the entire article by going to my website and checking on the link that will lead you to this incredible piece. And my website is drkortnialston.com. That's drkortnialston.com. Again, that's drkortnialston.com. I can't wait to see you guys there. And also, when you check out my website, you go to the podcast section and you will see all the episodes, and definitely check out episode 26 to get a closer look as it relates to that article. So he talks about mood regulation. It's mentioned in the piece, and he discusses a form of escapism during certain times. I'm sure many of us can relate to that, right? Listening to music and then just escaping. And he also mentions how music can serve as a form of emotional regulation. So Dr. Heshmatt says this, and I'm going to quote him. He says, quote, "People use music to achieve various goals, such as to energize, maintain focus on a task, and reduce boredom. For instance, sad music enables the listener to disengage from the distressing situations like breakup, death, etc., and focus instead on the beauty of the music. Further lyrics that can really resonate with the listener's personal experience can give voice to feelings or experiences that one might not be able to express oneself," end quote. Talk about relating to that quote. Can you relate to it? Are there lyrics that speak to you? Are there a couple of songs that you may play? And what I loved is that he talked about in terms of goals, right? He says we can have music that can energize us. We can have music that can help us maintain focus and reduce boredom. I will tell you that I like to listen to music before I do a speaking engagement. It's just putting me in this great space, and it's getting me all energized. And it's funny because when I'm speaking in I spoke a couple of days ago. I did two virtual training sessions for Middle Tennessee State University, and they were phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. I shared positive psychology with their department, so I trained faculty in terms of educator well-being, how they can leverage positive psychology, and I actually also trained students in terms of how they can leverage positive psychology to help them build social capital and develop positive relationships. Well, before I met with them, I was listening to different music and listening to a lot of Adina Menzel. Love her. And so by the time I started speaking, it was interesting close to the end because my first engagement with them was 1 o'clock their time, and there that is Central Time, and my time is Eastern. So it was really 2 o'clock for me, and then my last session, which were actually with faculty, was 6 o'clock their time and 7 o'clock mine. And it was interesting. A faculty member said to me, "Wow, you have just amazing energy." And I'm like, "Thank you so much." It's like, "Thanks." And I will tell you, like, I bring this type of energy into the classroom all the time, into my trainings all the time. But really, what helps me so much is music. Having the music in my ear, listening to it, helping it put me into whatever state I need at the time. And it's interesting that he mentioned in terms of goals. I've often noticed, have you checked out when I love the Olympics? And I love looking at seeing like Olympians, as many of the athletes, they have on the big um, headsets, and they're listening to music. Or I'm assuming they're listening to music because they're getting in the zone, right? And so whatever's going on in those headphones, I'm assuming some of it has to be music, if not all, right? But I am just in awe of that because I can relate to that. I love putting on my headset and just getting into the zone. So I actually just designed lyrics to live by, and I posted it in the Courting Happiness podcast Facebook community, our group there, our private community on Facebook. You're always welcome to join us there. It's a wonderful space to be able to talk to more people who are listening to the podcast, and for you to be able to share, your happiness journey and content that inspires you. And so I posted these lyrics to live by the other day, and it was based on the late Jonathan Larson, the creative genius behind Rent, the musical. There's a song titled No Way But Today. And the lyrics are this, and this is what I posted. Forget regret, or life is yours to miss. No other path, no other way, no day but today. And I love those lyrics. The interesting part, as I was reading them to you guys, I wanted so desperately to sing it, but I'm not a singer. But I know the song so well, and I love what Jonathan's lyrics, what he's shared, and I also feel so much empathy for all the characters, and I feel so much, like I love cheering each one of them on. There's like a special place for every character on Rent in my heart. I love them. I love them. And probably even people that you probably shouldn't like that are characters. I love them because I love every single character because I love the musical so much. And I love the value, but I also love. I'll be very honest with you. I love listening to the lyrics. I'm one of those people that when I'm listening to a song that I love, I listen to it and then I will find the lyrics, and I will actually go through the lyrics and look at the song. And what I love so much about Rent, I feel like I get to know Jonathan. You know, he's no longer here, and in terms of he passed away. I guess almost 20 something years ago at this point. And I love listening to those lyrics because I feel like I'm getting to know him and he how his creative process and this is creative genius. But I love Rent. I love everyone on Rent. Um, but I will say this: music is a healer. It has been a healer for me. Um, when my mother died, when she was transitioning, actually, hospice offered to provide music, a musical therapist or a music therapist. And he offered us again music therapy. And so I was excited about this because, I had just finished my PhD program and I knew about the value. I actually, ironically, have a friend who is doing graduate work in music therapy. And so I thought this was going to be great. So we said yes. And I remember while my mother was, in her bedroom and, here we are gathering around her, um, while she's on her deathbed, which when I say it that way, it's like, oh gosh, wow, Courtney, your mother was on her deathbed. But the interesting part, it was such a beautiful dynamic. So there were so many people in our home during that time because I had aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and people wanting to say goodbye and so many people wanting to either be a support for my mother or for me and my brother or father and our family, or just being there in terms of because of the love they've had for my mom and all of us, clearly, right? So it was so beautiful to see everyone in the house come together in that room when the music therapist played. She pulled out her guitar. She just, boy, her voice filled our home at that moment. And I say that because you can go through a roller coaster of emotions when a family member is transitioning. And at that moment, it just became focusing on these sweet sounds that was coming from this incredible, talented music therapist. And I could see how my mom enjoyed it. My mother enjoyed it, and everyone in that room just enjoyed it. And so it brought us a sense of togetherness. It shifted the mood a bit. And what was also so powerful is that she took request. So, we could request a song that was special to us, special to my mom individually or special to us as a family. It was a beautiful moment. Beautiful moment. And it proved really to be a wonderful celebration of life. Really wonderful celebration of life. So, music was such a healer for me. And that was a couple of years ago. My mother died in 2016. But music has been a healer for me for more than 20 years. So, the podcast episode, this one, is actually inspired by a post from the magnificent, I'm a huge fan of this woman. She is just an incredible singer, incredible actress. Her name is Heather Headley. And Heather is a Tony and Grammy Award winner. You can find her on Netflix. She plays Helen Decatur in a show called Sweet Magnolias. And I gotta say this, I pretty much binge watched the entire season when it came out on Netflix, like in one day. Next thing I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't moved from this spot because I'm just loving these characters. I fell in love with them. I couldn't stop watching. And another great visual to share is that my fiance Ken was right by my side watching it with me. We both loved it, by the way. I'm looking forward to season 2. But you can find Heather there. But I actually learned about Heather Headley. She caught my attention when she was on Broadway as Aida in Aida. Her performance with Adam Pascal, who also was in Rent, um, Adam, Heather, and that cast, wow, their performance made me feel less alone. Less alone. And at the time, I was 25 years old and I ended up becoming a widow. As I mentioned earlier in the intro, after 86 days of marriage, my late husband and I were engaged when I was 19. I remember being a widow in my mid 20s and feeling as if I was not only in this surreal experience, but I was in this club of my own. What was common within my circle at that time, because we're just starting our lives, right? Either just getting out of college for a couple of years out and starting to take on our careers and here I am working as a television reporter, um, in a major market. I was in Philadelphia at the time. And my friends were at the time were going through breakups were very common, you know, but not losing a partner because of death. And the interesting part about being in this club that I felt I was in is that because I was going through so much in terms of grieving, I didn't want to have a bunch of people in this club. I didn't want anyone in this club. I didn't want to be in this club. But I remember I remember going through this and saying, wow, wow, I lost someone. I lost a spouse. Here I am in my 20s, to death. So let's fast forward to now, right? Now, right? So Heather posts that 21 years ago that she took the stage at the Palace Theater on the corner of 47th Street and Broadway in New York. And Heather says this. I'm going to read her post. She says, quote, "The lights dimmed, and in the quiet, a haunting flute played. The curtain opened to reveal a museum. The best, most beautiful, most talented, most fine cast ever assembled. That curtain also opened and changed my life in a way I could never imagine. Aida, Aida, I am eternally grateful." Wow. So I commented on that post because I I had gone to the Palace Theater, guys, about a half dozen times. Half dozen times. Um, Literally close to, I think, 7. I stopped counting after I went like after my fifth. I was like, okay. I just loved what the musical did in terms of how it made me feel. So in my comment to Heather, responding to her 21 years and the magic she made on Broadway as Aida, I talked about going to the Palace a half dozen times, of course, 7 to be exact. And at the time, I was 25 years old, right? Working my dream job in television as a reporter, but living a nightmare of becoming a young widow. I shared with Heather that she, Adam, and the cast performance were so healing for me at that time. I told her the storyline helped me feel less alone as a young widow. And now, 20 years, an MBA and a PhD later, I told her I often talk about music and musicals and as a happiness scholar, like I'm doing right now, right? On this podcast with you. The beauty is that I told her that I'm happily engaged to a wonderful Southern gentleman. I thought since she now stars in Sweet Magnolia, she would love to know that I have an amazing man from North Carolina who is an incredible Southern gentleman. Thought she would love that. And I told her that he loves hearing from this Jersey girl's love of the theater, love of the arts. So before the pandemic, Ken and I were looking forward to traveling. And so in the post, I told her post pandemic, I'm looking forward to the lights on Broadway shining once again, opening and sharing it with my fiance. I told her that I was grateful for her performance, and her performance was so memorable and magical, and that it provided harmony and healing in my life. So she got like a 430 comments. And so many people touched by her work. So I woke up this morning with a response from Heather, and she said that my comment touched her heart, and she thanked me for that 20 years later, and with a smiley face. And I treasure getting that response from her, but I was really grateful for the opportunity to look back on that memory. See, after sharing that, I really got reflective. At this stage, you guys probably know I do a lot of reflection. I'm very very about looking at oneself, looking at me, also in terms of really drawn to helping others and loving, learning, and researching positive psychology. So I loved the opportunity that comment gave me to be reflective. I thought about that girl me, who traveled to the Palace Theater with friends and sometimes alone to see the performances, to see the performance of Aida. I know that girl, talking about me again, right? I know when I look back on it, I know that she understood how resilient she was. But there were moments when she felt so alone. Sitting in a theater when those lights, as Heather mentioned, dimmed and the orchestra played, and Heather and Adam just, their voices are just larger than life. And when the cast performed, the ensemble, this incredible cast, the music helped me make sense of my life. It helped me understand, or at least it allowed my grief to allow me to be reflective even then. It allowed me to feel less alone, even though on many occasions I was sitting in that theater watching those performances alone. But I didn't feel that way when they hit the stage. And I would often sit in the front. I love the art so much. I love being as close as I possibly can. And I remember feeling the motion and being moved by the music, like just feeling the orchestra. I loved every bit of how it hit my senses, especially as it related to sound. And this is interesting because I wasn't listening to the radio at that time. My late husband was a DJ. He's a very popular DJ in the area. Um, and he would travel, and then he would also make appearances on the radio in the Philadelphia market. And I just couldn't listen to the radio back then. It was hard for me to listen. But the live music in that theater on 46 and Broadway, I'm sorry, it was like 47th and Broadway, it was a healing force for me. It helped open my heart to music, and it slowly began to bring music back into my being. Because when I would get in my car and I would travel to the train station, and I would probably be in my car for a half an hour, then I'll be on a train for over an hour and 20 minutes, because when my late husband died, I moved out of the area where we live, where my commute was roughly 20 to 30 minutes, right? And then I decided, because my mother was diagnosed with cancer 3 weeks before he and I got married, and the day he died is when my mother had her first chemo treatment. I knew I wanted to be home. I just knew. And so my parents at the time were living in the New York, New Jersey area. So I was more closer to New York. My job at the time was at a television station in Philadelphia. And so I literally took, I guess, a 2-hour train ride, or an hour and 40 minutes, 30, I don't remember anymore, but I knew it was over an hour and a half. But I would also drive about 30 to 40 minutes to the train station. And I would travel in silence. I wouldn't play anything. But when I was in that theater, the music and the sound wrapped around me. And so when I look back on that, and as I'm sitting here talking with you, I think that helped me open my heart a little bit more, right, to letting music back in. I can't even imagine doing that now, because as I mentioned before, I train or do a training session, or if I do a speaking engagement, I have my headphones on, I'm in the zone. But back then, I needed silence. But when I was in that theater, I loved everything that performance offered. Everything. And so, we live in a different world now, because this was 20 years ago. Right now, we can customize everything on our phones. But again, that was back 20 years ago. I didn't listen to the radio back then for an extended period of time. But music also became a great healer for me. So Heather ended her post on Instagram by saying that she is grateful. And I'm truly grateful on how the time in that theater helped me. And it helped strengthen my resilience. I'm so grateful where I am now. Before the pandemic, as I mentioned, my fiance Ken and I planned to travel to New York He wanted to see my home state in my eyes. And I also wanted to show him all my favorite places, which of course would be the theater in the city. But I'm so grateful to be able to do so and do just that once the pandemic is behind us, once it's safer to travel. And at this point, um, you know, uh, Broadway is in the process of reopening, but they haven't, so the lights are out literally on Broadway for right now. So at least during the recording of this podcast. So I'm looking forward to when the lights are back on. And I'm so excited. I am so excited to share that experience with Ken. I cannot wait to do that. And that is the beauty. That's the beauty of the magic of music. So love the article so much and so glad I could share that with you. I want you to embrace the journey that music can take you. Now, Andrew Pollock has a great quote that I hope inspires you. And I'm going to quote Andrew. Music is our common energy. Add music to your life every day. What does your musical life consist of? I hope you find the beat of your musical life that will help nurture and transform you. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Join us on Instagram at Courting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private group on Facebook. You can find us with the same name, that is Courting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook community is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope that you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.